Welcome to Defenders Live. I am your host, Lora Thorson. Daniel Keenan is a businessman, builder, and congressional candidate running to represent Arizona's 5th District. He grew up in the district. He's now campaigning to serve. He worked blue-collar jobs from warehouse floors to construction sites, and eventually he built his own company, developing homes and creating jobs across the East Valley. He's running on an America First platform centered around border security, constitutional freedom, faith, family, and economic growth. But whether you agree with him politically or not, this conversation goes far beyond campaigns or headlines. Tonight, we're going to talk about leadership, responsibility, freedom, and what happens when everyday people decide to stop sitting on the sidelines and actually step forward to shape the future of their communities. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find this show. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
You bet. Well, I don't usually have political candidates on my show. I think maybe I've had one or two in the past, but as a general rule, I don't. And I made an exception because Adam Winch, I trust his judgment. Adam Winch knows you decently well, and he said you would really enjoy having Daniel on the show. And so I don't know you, and so I want to get to know you, and I'd like to introduce you to my audience. I really like your background and backstory, that you're just an everyday guy who works hard, who is trying to step up and do something. But man, that's a huge feat. I mean, that's not something you just choose overnight. What was the process of you getting to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a lot to take on. I think it evolved a little bit over time. I first considered it around 2020. When we had lockdowns going on, when I saw some of our freedoms being stripped away that I thought were, and when you saw businesses being shut down and, restrictions in schools, et cetera, and as well as the 2020 election, that's when I really started considering it. The timing maybe wasn't just right then. And so, I stayed active, I would say, on a social level, attending rallies, social media, et cetera. And then, late 2024, our congressman in the district, Andy Biggs, announced he was going to run for governor of Arizona. Andy Biggs has been a great representative for our district, a defender of the Constitution, always stands for freedom, has stood with our president. And so I knew there'd be a big hole for our district when he announced he was leaving office and running for governor. And so, I thought, listen, the 5th District is going to need someone who knows the district, which I was born and raised in here. I've been here my whole life. Someone who's going to continue the great work and legacy of his and not let it fall into the hands of, the establishment or being handpicked by Washington, D.C. So, I spoke with my wife about it. She knew that, I had ambitions of running, and I know that I'm the right man for the job. I know this district better than anyone in my race. And I think we need to get back to sort of what our founders intended, more citizen-led legislators in the halls of Congress. And, Arizona has a recent history of doing so. We have Eli Crane in office, who's been great for Arizona, who was a business owner like me. We have Paul Gosar, who was a dentist before he was a congressman. And so I'm looking to continue that trend here in Arizona and also inspire more everyday Americans to do what our founders intended. People who really understand their district, their constituents. I'm not bought and paid for by anybody. And that means a lot to me. And I think it means a lot to voters as well. I don't owe anyone any favors. And I wouldn't go to Washington to make any friends. I would go to Washington to fight for the values that I believe we all share here in my district.
Yeah. I love your honest way of just existing, Daniel. And I hope that continues in the future, especially if you get elected. That's something that I noticed as I was listening to you. One of the things that kind of popped up for me was, well, a couple of things. One is I'm curious. I'm curious what the people around you, especially your close family, they're signing up for something too by doing this. I'm curious what their thoughts are about that. And then the second thing that popped in my head as you were talking, because, and I don't mean this wrong, it feels like kind of a fact that's going on politically right now, is that as I'm watching you and I'm hearing these talking points, I'm thinking to myself, you are out talking to people and seeing this. And so I'm just wondering, are you feeling a bit of the tiredness of people? Are you witnessing people who are just like, what the heck, and are just tired of listening to talking points and listening to talking heads and feeling like nothing is really happening, or not really what they were promised? So I guess those are two separate questions, but
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I first told my family, they were a little, I don't want to say shocked, but they were, I guess a little surprised, I would say, in the beginning. And my wife has, first off, that's my high school sweetheart. I've been with my wife since I was 18 years old. She knows that I always sort of shoot for the stars. I'm always looking to the future. I'm always taking on a lot. I am a risk taker, and I want to do what's right, and I do what I believe in. And oftentimes, when I set my mind to something, I'm successful in those endeavors. So a little bit shock in the beginning, but now they're fully on board. They're more in the feeling of, okay, you better go win now. You've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources. Go win.
Right.
So they're fully on board. Tonight my wife and Chuck, my youngest, is going to be helping. We're going to be doing some footage with some camera crews, and so they're on board. As I go around and talk to voters, my constituents, I go to every single Republican club, meeting, etc., speak everywhere. And yeah, people are sort of tired of the talking points. They're tired of having the same career politicians representing them, the same career politicos that promise the world and go to Washington and sell out. And so, I pride myself on that. I will never sell out to a lobbyist. None of this is about the money for me. I could care less about the money. I make a decent living now. I've worked for everything I have in life, blood, sweat, and tears since I was a very young man. So this isn't about the money for me. I don't need it. I truly want to go and represent the district that I was born and raised in and do a good job for them. And that means many things, right? For one, that means getting down our cost of living, making home affordable
right now.
It's crushing us, and making home affordability a reality again for working class families. I've been building homes pretty much my entire life, and I know the industry inside and out, and I'll be ready on day one to take on that fight. I really want to help our senior citizens who have so long been ripped off with their prescription drug prices. And President Trump has done a good job. He's led the way. He's combating this right now, but he's calling on the White House, and him are calling on Congress to codify some of the bills that he's putting into law. And I have some of my own pieces of legislation that I want to implement to go after the drug companies who continuously rip our seniors off by subsidizing the rest of the world. So yeah.
You think that there are, and just your gut read right now, because it's so hard to tell sometimes, what percentage right now do you think of people that are in Congress are of a similar mindset to you and actually will act on that? Do you know what I mean? It's such a dirty game. It feels like a dirty game, and And I think that's why some people are hesitant to get involved the way that you are, or even on a local level. I think that same thing can happen. What percentage of people do you think that are actually working for the people? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like a very small percentage.
I don't know an exact count.
Yeah.
I've met many members of Congress and in our Senate, of course. I would say it's a small group. There's certainly some rock stars out there. A few that come to mind. I've already mentioned. Eli Crane, Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, Representative Gill, Tim Burchett. I think of those guys. I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Listening to Tim Burchett, he says he showers in the gym and he sleeps inside his office because he can't afford anywhere in Washington, D.C. So that tells me that, he's not taking the lobbyist money. He's not selling his soul. And I would do the same thing. Right. But that's a huge part of my platform is we have to get back to that. And, it's a lot of people do stay on the sidelines, good folks who want to represent and want to come forward and do the work. But the establishment doesn't want those guys. They want yes guys. They want career politicos, guys they can control, guys they know they can make backroom deals with. And so we need more everyday folks like me stepping up and saying no more to that.
Is there forgive me for being so naive about some of this. Like I'm thinking about people that are watching right now that have that same pull that you had, that you took action on. I mean, you didn't come from a family that knows a lot about this. I assume you learned everything from the ground up and are learning still. Is there anything about it that surprised you as far as like how hard it is to run, or what parts of it are hard for you, and are there some things you're just naturally suited to for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I didn't grow up in politics or anything like that. My parents are very hardworking, normal blue collar folks, but they did always keep me and my siblings informed. So I would say from a young age, I knew what was going on politically in our world and in our country. Mm-hmm. What I would, I guess find hard about it is in some ways it's, just like a huge popularity game, right? It's who you know, who can get you in front of the right groups, who can help you fundraise. Mm-hmm. And so I would say probably what you think is going on is probably going on, but I've sort of just stayed in my lane, done everything I possibly can, and not relying on the establishment or lobbyists or bureaucrats at all. And I think the voters will respect that.
Yeah, I think that at least for me anyway, it's very refreshing to see someone. You're very well spoken, but you're not so polished that it turns me off. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's so many people that are, it's almost like there's like this training ground for politicians or something. And they, they start off a certain way and then they go into this training ground or something and they sort of morph or something. And then it's like, wait, who are you anymore? I'm not even sure now.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I may not always have the perfect political jargon always, but
yeah.
But regular everyday people, don't talk like that, right? They don't throughout their everyday life. They don't talk like that, and they don't understand it quite. But you're right. Most politicians have the perfect terms, the perfect words, and they don't sound like regular people.
I think that the lack of authenticity, I just got off of an interview yesterday where we were talking about the integration of AI and how I think people are really craving realness on social media and just in the world in general, and are really looking for real people and not packaged BS. It's like they can see through that so easily now after the last 6 years that we've lived through. I think that has been honed in on now more than ever. So, I know you said America First was what your platform is, but I would like you, if you could, to go into a few of the main issues that you definitely are concerned about, and just let the audience know more about, in case they don't know what that is.
Yeah. So America First is we need to start focusing on Americans and Americans only. I think about our debt. We're sitting at almost $40 trillion. And we keep sending the same career politicians to Washington who say they're gonna fix it, and they don't. Some of the few things in my district that I say contribute to that, we're dealing with an H-1B visa program that's gotten out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that the best and the brightest the world has to offer should have a chance to come to America, but H-1B visa program has largely been abused and exploited. You have companies who are not offering those job openings to Americans. They're secretly going backdoor and giving those jobs to foreigners from all over the world. And they do it because long-term, they save money. I've seen studies that show maybe over 10 years, they save $1 million per employee. So we have our young Americans who are just graduating college and looking forward to that first big job opportunity, or young Americans who are, just entering the workforce and looking forward to that first big job opportunity. And they're not getting it because we have companies who are giving those jobs away to foreigners all over the world. So I want those jobs to go to our young Americans, those tech jobs to go to young Americans. And oftentimes, the money that these H-1B recipients get doesn't even stay in America. It gets sent out of America, doesn't contribute to our economy, and it also puts a squeeze on our housing supply. And so we also have a housing shortage here going on in America. Depending on the study, you may see 5 to 10 million homes. So we got H-1Bs that are out of control. Obviously, I'm in a border state of Arizona where we have millions of illegal aliens. And, Washington for the last 30 years has allowed that to happen. Millions under the Joe Biden administration poured into Arizona, poured into our country. That also puts a strain on our housing supply because they have to live somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we have young Americans right now who are struggling to buy a home or rent a home, between the H-1B and illegal immigration, it's putting a huge strain on our housing supply. So we need to focus on Americans so that they're getting those houses. And also, look, getting back to America First, what comes to my mind is something that President Trump has been doing through his tariffs. Now, you may agree or disagree with tariffs and how that affects and falls down to Americans. But the fact is that countries all over the world have been charging us tariffs, double, triple, or even more of what we charge them. So we're getting ripped off. We have been getting ripped off for a very long time. I'm all for free trade and having good relationships with countries, but we got to get back to having fair trade deals. We can't be getting ripped off. And you see that it's starting to work. The long-term vision of the administration. A couple of weeks ago, they announced thousands and thousands of manufacturing jobs are coming back to America, which is a good sign. And also in the big, beautiful bill, a lot of this was addressed. So they're incentivizing American-made products. They're giving American companies incentives to buy American-made products, but also giving companies like me immediate expensing on the machinery we use to build homes and build projects, and the machinery we use to deliver those materials to build those projects. So all of that kind of together is my America First agenda that I stand on. At the end of the day, I want to focus on Americans. If we weren't $40 trillion in debt, if we were in $40 trillion in the green, then we could maybe start looking at helping out others around the world. But we need to start helping Americans and putting our focus here.
If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month, we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber and take your next step toward becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs. Yeah, that's a huge responsibility. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but it seems as though we have slowly over the years, and the government does have a responsibility, but I'm just curious if you think that personally, as citizens, we have a responsibility as well, and what those responsibilities are. In order to be an active participant in society, just voting for one thing is is an important thing that people should be participating in, paying attention to the current issues of what's going on, and having an opinion about that and stating those opinions on a local level. I think those are important things. I'm curious what you are thinking about public safety as well as personal safety. So when I say public safety, I mean like law enforcement. When I say personal safety, I'm speaking directly to the 2A community and your stance about that, about gun rights. And because obviously the people that are watching this are definitely pro 2A. I assume you are as well, but I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pro 2A. I always sort of how I was raised with the Second Amendment. We moved out to a town called Queen Creek when I was in second or third grade, to a town of probably 10,000 people. Now it's probably 10 times that at least. But, I think back to when my dad bought me my first rifle. It was a Marlin 22. And I was a young teenager, maybe, a young boy. But, I would just go out where I lived. It was the middle of nowhere. So I would go out on my dirt bike, on my quad, and just go have fun and do target practice. You'd probably have a better chance of seeing a coyote before you saw a person where I was at. So that's sort of how I was raised. I'm a member of many gun clubs, and I absolutely will defend our Second Amendment all the way. Law enforcement, I think one of the biggest scams and tragedies we saw over the Joe Biden administration and Democrats in general, the attack on our law enforcement, when you talk about them being defunded all over our country, those are the brave, some of the bravest people we have in our country. And we need to make sure that they are funded completely so that they can do their job. I couldn't stand those years when I saw people talking about defunding the police. It
was shocking. It was just like, I felt like I was living on a different planet. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Right. And then, you see, they've probably tried to get away from that stance because they know it's a losing stance. Mm-hmm. But all I can say is I'll defend and support our law enforcement officer and the community 100% of the way. I will defend our Second Amendment 100% of the way. And I think we actually need to continue to go further, such as, getting rid of the NFA and many other small pieces of legislation that they try to sneak in to eat away at our Second Amendment rights. Critics will say, no one's trying to take your guns away. Well, and they'll say it's, you have your Second Amendment, but when you dig into it, they introduce small pieces of legislation here and there, whether it's suppressors or the NFA. They try to chip away at it little by little. And yes, our constitutional rights are being stripped away. You have states that aren't, following the Constitution. It's in our Constitution. Every state, every city should be a constitutional carry, in my opinion. And that's what I will fight for.
Yeah, I know. I think to those of us that are in the community, it's very much common sense to have that stance, but it's wild. Okay, the spectrum is wild, and it seems as though it is more divided now than ever. I don't know. It's hard to keep a read on what's actually like on the hearts and minds of Americans and where they stand. But and it's hard to watch things on social media and then remember, oh wait, they are showcasing the extreme of the extreme, probably. Maybe as a whole, it might not be as good as it has been in the past, but is it really that bad everywhere? You know what I mean? Um, but little by little over the years, I've noticed there is just this slow, I hate to call it like a cancer, but that's what popped in my head really the values and the ideals and the belief system of what created America and who we really stand for. It just feels like this slow process of degradation, and it's really hard to watch. Do you think that there will be in the future, hopefully in the near future, do you foresee like a bunch more Daniels or a bunch more Elis, or the guys that you were talking about continue to just come to the front of the line? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely do think there will be more, because the people of this great nation are tired of career politicians. They truly are. Yeah. And so that's one of my biggest hopes is when I win, I inspire more everyday Americans, and not just Daniels, but a nurse or a teacher or an electrician, just more everyday people who are willing to serve and can best represent their constituents. Mm-hmm. Again, I go back to, that's what our founders intended. Our representatives used to be farmers and carpenters. And, they would go to Washington for, a few years or a few terms, and then go back home and hand off to the next qualified representative. Mm-hmm. This cycle now of career politicians who stay there forever, they make a career out of it, and stay till they're 85 years old and hold on to power. And we're tired of it. I'm tired of it. And I think most Americans are. So, that's where I jump into term limits. I think we should have them. I support them. I've signed my term limits pledge, and to support any legislation that comes forward to put that in.
Have you noticed, or do you have any stories of pushback or criticism that you've received and how you've handled that? I'm sure there's plenty of that along the journey. I'm sure that strengthens you in many ways as well. What is your process for handling that? And do you have any stories to share?
Yeah, I don't know about anything in specific stories, but I would say, I love to work hard. I love the grind. I love the process. I love proving people wrong. And I've sort of gotten criticized of, saying, listen, you haven't served in politics before. What makes you think you're ready to do this? And so I just give them kind of what I've already told you. Our founders intended for us to have citizen-led legislators. Mm-hmm. Someone who knows how to balance a budget, someone who has the simple understanding of, listen, if my business or my country revenue doesn't exceed its expenditures, we're going to go bankrupt. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what would happen in the real world. But Washington and career politicians seem to not follow that. Mm-hmm. So, my whole life I've been proving people wrong. Whether that was when I was a young man in sports or a young man starting his own business. But I get the job done. And so I handle the criticism very well. It doesn't faze me at all.
You don't seem worried at all. I love this. Yeah. I need to channel some of this. This is good. So do you think that part of, and I want to say their strategy, but I'm not even sure who they are, but it feels like there might be some kind of like strategy of, well, I'm not going to step forward because there's nothing I can do to change this. This is like a runaway train at this point, and there is no way we can turn this thing around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of people that are feeling that way. Like, well, if I thought there was a chance, I might, but it doesn't feel like there is at this point.
Yeah.
Do you agree that as soon as we start thinking that way, then we are already defeated? You know?
That's a great way to put it. And I would encourage and tell everyone that you can make a difference, whether that's on a city level, on a state level, or a federal level. So I would encourage folks to be involved in their local precinct and become a precinct committeeman. And so from there, you'll know what's going on in your state. You can make the argument that Washington is too far gone, and that truly, how you save the country is by, saving the states. Mm-hmm. So, I would encourage folks to be involved if they do want to make a difference. Run for office. And the first way to do that is become a precinct committeeman or a state committeeman, and you'll be involved in your legislative district. You can make a difference. Get your friends, get your family, go to these meetings so you know what's going on in your state. And that would be the first step. So the only way we continue to save our country is to have everyone involved. We can't sit on the sidelines. We have to get out and work. We have to support the candidates that we prefer and prop up the good folks that we know can lead and make a difference in this country.
Yeah, and speaking of that, that's a great segue into plugging your website, because we do need to support people like you and you specifically, and we can do that by going to danielkeenanforcongress.com, and Keenan is spelled, for those of you that are listening and not watching, Keenan, danielkeenanforcongress.com. I put some of your social media down there too. You're on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Is that correct?
That is correct. You got it all correct right there. Thank you so much.
And even if we're not from Arizona, we can still support you, right?
Absolutely. So that's a little bit of a misconception. Folks will say online and social media, I see, well, I'm in Texas, but I wish I could vote for you. Or even in Arizona, they're outside of my district. It matters who we send to Congress. It really does. Mm-hmm. How many times do we have the one person who will either cast that vote or not cast that vote that really affects the entire country? Mm-hmm. So I would encourage everyone across the country, yes, you can support, you can help, you can donate, you can spread my message, because it does matter who we send to Congress. It affects us all.
Yeah, we need as many Daniel Keenans in Congress as we can get.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to touch on this because you're in Arizona and you have a pulse, on what's going on down there more than I do. I'm curious, have you seen the conversation around border security change as the administrations have changed? As far as like people on the ground, did they think that building a wall, for example, was ever not a good thing to do? And now they understand, oh, actually it was, because of all the things we've seen with deportations and all the things going on with ICE. What are people's take on that down there then versus now?
Well, for one, we're thankful that President Trump came in and closed the border. Mm-hmm. And I think continuously, it's been record-setting of crossings or encounters at the border since he came into office. So for one, we're appreciative of that. Two, there's sort of a battle and a struggle that we still have going on here in Arizona, because we have a governor in Katie Hobbs who doesn't necessarily support that. And, when Joe Biden took office, they sort of undid what President Trump had solved on the border in his previous administration. So we're still sort of battling that on the ground. We have, Democrat-controlled state. We got state Katie Hobbs. We got our Attorney General, Chris Mays, who are constantly fighting the Trump administration. So here on the ground in Arizona, a lot of folks are focused on getting them out of office so we can help the administration. We can continue to keep the border closed, and we continue to deport the criminal illegal aliens that are in our country. So that's sort of the dynamic in Arizona.
So most people are for it then. Most people understand that it's a good thing to close the border.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arizona is a Republican state, even
Yeah.
though we have some Democrat leadership going on right now. But we got Phoenix and Tucson, two largest cities that have contributed to that. But yes, on the ground, they support it. Arizona's been dealing with illegal immigration for as long as I've been alive. We've seen fentanyl pouring into the communities of all throughout Arizona, killing Americans. We've had to deal with human trafficking for all the years that I've been alive in the state. So we're continuously fighting it. So absolutely, we support the Trump administration and what they're trying to do for the border.
And I'm curious too, have gun laws changed throughout the years down there? Have they gotten better or worse? Or what's the landscape for that down there?
Well, I would say Arizona still hasn't changed much. It's good. We can still exercise our Second Amendment rights, and that hasn't been chipped away yet. It's more important, I believe, now than ever, that we all carry. My wife carries, and that makes me feel better when she's traveling throughout the day, wherever she's going. We see a lot of political violence going on throughout our country. It seems that conservatives are being targeted for their beliefs, and just tying it back into the border of human trafficking and cartels and drug trafficking that we have going on in Arizona. You better be carrying. Absolutely.
Yeah. And my follow-up question to that was going to be, does that ever concern you, becoming a political figure? Does your personal safety, I'm sure it crosses your mind, but I've been listening to you for the last 40 minutes and I pretty much know the answer. I'm pretty sure that you're not a man who lives in fear, that you're prepared for whatever comes your way, and you're not going to let a little bit of intimidation,
No,
make you go a different direction, so.
No, I mean, of course, it's crossed my mind, especially when you've seen some political violence going on around across the country. And, I've also introduced some legislation that sort of fights against, I would say, big pharma, insurance companies that want to transition and maim our children. So I know that's not going to make the other party happy about me. But no, I'm not worried about it. I'm a man of faith. I know I'm doing this for all the right reasons. Doesn't slow me down one bit.
That's awesome. I believe that. So if you guys want to help Daniel, which I highly encourage you to do, I mean, it's so refreshing. I actually, whenever I knew I was interviewing a political candidate today, there's a little bit of yuck inside me, Daniel,
I don't blame you.
Truly. And I'm like, well, but Adam said he's a good guy. I'll believe what Adam says and I'll interview him. And I'm really glad I did. I'm really, really glad I did. You give me hope. You give me hope for the future, and you inspire me. And I just so thank you for being of service to this country. And I really hope people will go to DanielKeenanForCongress.com and help Daniel, because this is a hard battle to fight. And unfortunately, he needs money to do that. And that's just the way that it is, right?
Thank you very much. Everything you said, I don't disagree with. I'm not taking money from any lobbyists. Of course, no foreign entities. I'm relying on my own money that I've worked so hard for since I was a very young man. I've worked for everything I have in life, and I'm relying on grassroots donations from folks in this country and in my state. So, whether that's $5 or $100, it all adds up and it helps us out. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me. It was a great conversation. So
it was fun. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Daniel. We'll be rooting for you.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you so much. Grateful for the